A plain, unmarked book sits behind glass in a quiet library. It has no title on its cover, no author's name on the first page, no dedication to explain who it was meant for. And yet, it has defeated emperors, scholars, and codebreakers for more than a century. Because the moment you open it, you realize this isn't just unreadable. It's confident. It reads like the author expected someone to understand it immediately. And the most unsettling question is not, what does it say? The most unsettling question is, who was it written for? A gloved hand turns the first parchment page under soft museum light. Strange symbols flow in clean lines, separated by spaces like real words. The handwriting never trembles, never searches, never looks uncertain. Above the text, an impossible plant stretches across the page, painted in greens and browns. The roots look like tangled organs. The leaves resemble something familiar until your brain tries to name it and fails. You turn another page and see circles, stars, and zodiac-like emblems arranged with precision. You turn another page and see nude figures wading through green pools connected by tubes. Then you unfold a page and the book suddenly becomes wider than your arms. This isn't a random sketchbook. It's structured like a manual. And that structure is what makes it feel like evidence. This is the Voynich Manuscript. Some call it the world's most mysterious book. But that's not accurate. Because it isn't just mysterious. It's stubborn. It refuses to be categorized, even when you try to force it into the neat boxes we use for medieval texts: herbal, astrology, medicine, alchemy, prayer, cipher, hoax. Every label fits for a minute and then slips off like wet cloth. Tonight, we're going to walk through the entire story like a documentary investigation. We're going to move through what the manuscript shows, section by section, like rooms in a locked house. We're going to examine the linguistic patterns that make it look like language without giving us meaning. We're going to stare at the plants that refuse identification. We're going to step into the history of cryptographers who tried to break it and failed. We're going to face the hoax argument and why it refuses to die. We're going to explore the extreme theories that people whisper when logic runs out. And we're going to end with the possibility that feels the most human and the most tragic, that the book may be perfectly readable, just not by anyone alive. The manuscript's pages are made of vellum, not paper. That matters because vellum is expensive. It's labor turned into a surface. It means the author wasn't casually scribbling. Someone planned this. Someone invested real resources into making it last. And when a person chooses permanence, they usually have a reason. Imagine the author at a desk in a cold room. A lamp flickers and shadows swim on the walls. A quill scratches the same unfamiliar alphabet again and again until it becomes muscle memory. A brush lays down thin washes of green and blue, careful not to soak the skin. A fold-out page is measured, folded, and stitched so it opens like a secret map. This is months of work, possibly years. So the question becomes sharp. What kind of secret is worth that kind of time? The Voynich Manuscript is not one uninterrupted stream of content. It is divided into sections that feel deliberately themed. The first and largest section is dominated by plants. Whole pages are devoted to a single botanical drawing with blocks of text beside it. It looks like a medieval herbal, the kind of book used by healers and apothecaries. But there's a problem. The plants look wrong. Not messy wrong. Not bad drawing wrong. Confident wrong. As if the illustrator wanted you to almost recognize them, but not quite. A plant fills the screen like a portrait. The stem is too thick, the leaves too symmetrical, the flower too stylized. The roots spread like fingers, exaggerated, almost screaming for attention. You move to the next plant and feel the same effect. Familiar shapes rearranged into something unnameable. A third plant appears, and it looks like two different species fused into one. A fourth looks like a real plant wearing a mask. And the text beside each plant stays calm and repetitive, like entries in a reference guide. This is where the plant studies become a battlefield. Because if the plants are real, they could point to a region, a climate, an origin. If the plants are symbolic, they could point to rituals, astrology, or coded medicine. If they are invented, then either the author was creating fantasy or the author was hiding something. And if they are composites, it suggests a mind pulling fragments from memory and building idealized specimens. The longer you stare, the more it feels like you are being teased. What do you think is more likely here? A medieval writer inventing an entire botanical world for no clear reason. Or a medieval writer disguising real plants because they didn't want the wrong eyes to understand. The manuscript then shifts, and the plants give way to circles. The page becomes geometry. Stars and suns and moons appear in careful diagrams. Zodiac-like symbols show up in a way that feels familiar enough to anchor you. But the surrounding structures don't feel like decoration. They feel like tools. A circular chart dominates the page, divided into sections like a wheel of time. Small human figures appear near the edges, repeating like markers. The symbols around them look like a schedule, a system, something you could use to calculate when to do something. And suddenly, the manuscript's possible purpose feels closer. Because herbals and astrology were often linked in medieval medicine. Certain plants were harvested at certain times. Certain treatments were done under certain signs. If the Voynich Manuscript is a medical text, this could be its clock. Then comes the section that makes people whisper. The biological pages. The pages filled with nude figures in green pools. Bodies connected by tubes that loop between baths like plumbing. Figures emerging from vessels. Figures floating. Figures standing in fluid, as if fluid is part of the diagram. Some have swollen abdomens. Some look like they're in stages of something. Birth, transformation, purification, or maybe something that has no direct translation into modern categories. A page reveals a cluster of small nude figures arranged around a central pool. Thin tubes connect pools like veins on a map. The green wash looks like water, but it could also be a symbol for something else. The faces are simple, almost anonymous, as if identity doesn't matter here. Another page shows a figure stepping into a tubular structure, like an organ. Another shows figures arranged in a chain of baths, like a process with steps. And the text continues on the margins, cold and orderly. This is the moment most people fall into a trap, because these pages feel like they should mean something obvious. They feel like fertility, or anatomy, or alchemy, or occult ritual, but every interpretation hits a wall, because the imagery is consistent, yet unfamiliar. And if it's allegory, we don't know what tradition it belongs to. After that, the manuscript opens into its most physically dramatic feature, the fold-outs. Large pages that expand into multi-panel diagrams. They look like cosmological maps or complex systems drawn as circles within circles. Some viewers see geography. Some see star charts. Some see a blueprint for something. And because they are fold-outs, they feel like the author is saying, this part is important. A folded page opens like a secret compartment. A huge circular diagram appears, layered like a city seen from above. Another fold-out shows multiple medallions connected by lines, like a network. The drawings feel like they describe a world, not just a plant or a body. And for a moment, it feels like you are about to understand. Then the symbols remind you you're still locked out. Next, the manuscript shifts again into a section that looks more practical. Plants return, but not as full portraits. Now they appear as parts. Roots, leaves, fragments, displayed near jars or vessels. This looks like preparation, extraction, storage, like the author is telling you what to do with the materials from the earlier herbal section. A page shows a cluster of roots arranged like ingredients on a table. Colored jars sit beside them like containers for tinctures or powders. The text is denser, as if instructions matter more than descriptions now. The overall vibe becomes less mystical and more procedural. And then the book changes one final time. It becomes mostly text. Page after page of continuous writing, marked by small star-like symbols that separate entries. This section feels like recipes, lists, formulas, the kind of thing that could contain the key, if a key exists at all. But without images to triangulate, it becomes the most impenetrable part. A long stretch of pages flips by, all text, no plant, no zodiac, no math. The symbols repeat with slight variations, like grammar. The entries are separated neatly, like a cookbook for something that has no modern name. And the longer it goes, the more it feels like the author is finishing their work. Like this is the part meant for actual use. Now we step back from the visuals and talk about language. Because the Voynich Manuscript does not look like random scribbles. It has spacing that looks like word separation. It has repeated patterns that look like common words. It has variations that look like prefixes and suffixes. And the real shock is that statistical analysis has repeatedly suggested the text behaves like it has structure beyond simple randomness. A screen shows a transcription of the symbols into a standardized alphabet used by researchers. The text becomes data. Words become tokens. The manuscript becomes a long sequence you can analyze with math. And when researchers study distributions, something strange happens. Certain words cluster in certain sections, just like topic-related vocabulary clusters in real books. And relationships emerge between sections based on shared vocabulary patterns. That sounds like proof of meaning. But it isn't, because structured nonsense can imitate meaning. A skilled generator can create patterns that look real. And that is why the manuscript is such a perfect trap. It always gives you enough structure to keep you hopeful, but not enough to let you escape. This brings us to the cryptographers. Because if anyone could tear apart a structured text and expose what's underneath, it would be professional codebreakers. And some of the most serious minds in cryptography tried. They failed. A black and white photograph of a serious-faced analyst fades in. A desk is covered in symbol charts and frequency tables. A hand draws columns of repeating glyphs. Pages of notes pile up like snowdrifts. The atmosphere feels like a war fought against silence. For decades, cryptographers treated the Voynich Manuscript like an enemy cipher. They tried classic techniques, frequency analysis, pattern matching, assumptions about common words, and attempts to map it to known languages. They tried the idea that it could be a known language disguised by a substitution system. They tried the idea that it could be multiple layers deep, like an encryption on top of an encryption. They tried the idea that it could be a phonetic system for a language written in a strange alphabet, and still, nothing held. Then came a darker conclusion from some corners of the cryptographic world. What if it isn't a cipher of a known language at all? What if it is an invented language? A constructed system with no other surviving examples? If that's true, then there might be nothing to crack in the usual way, because you can't break a language. You can only learn it, and learning requires context and community. It requires other texts. It requires bilingual clues. It requires a Rosetta Stone, and the Voynich Manuscript has none. Now we arrive at the theory that haunts serious researchers, because it's both plausible and ugly, the hoax theory. The idea that the Voynich Manuscript might be meaningless text designed to look meaningful. A medieval con built to impress a rich buyer. A candlelit room appears, and a wealthy collector sits with a strange book. The collector flips pages, dazzled by exotic script and bizarre diagrams. The seller watches quietly, reading the collector's fascination like a heartbeat. Coins change hands. A mystery is purchased. There is a specific reason the hoax theory won't die. Because it explains the missing community. It explains the lack of sister manuscripts. It explains the absence of any confirmed translation. It explains why the text could be language-like, without being language. And it explains the manuscript's strange ability to generate obsession, because a hoax is built for attention. But the hoax theory also has to climb a steep hill, because if this is meaningless, it is meaninglessly consistent. It is meaninglessly structured across different sections. It is meaninglessly engineered to survive multiple styles of scrutiny. And that kind of hoax would require not just artistry, but a deep understanding of what people expect real writing to look like. It would require a mind capable of building a linguistic illusion so durable it can trap mathematicians centuries later. So the hoax theory doesn't end the mystery. It transforms the mystery. Instead of asking, "What does the book say?" you have to ask, who was skilled enough to create this illusion, and why? Now we step into the wild theories, not because they are likely, but because the manuscript creates them like a machine. When evidence fails to resolve ambiguity, imagination rushes in to fill the vacuum. The alien theory. A non-human visitor cataloging Earth's life and sky in a private script, dropping the notebook and disappearing. The plants look wrong because they aren't from here, or because the observer misunderstands. The diagrams look wrong because they refer to systems we don't know. The bathing figures look wrong because the author's concept of biology is not ours. The time travel theory. A human from the future uses medieval materials and pigments to blend in, writing in a private script so their knowledge won't destabilize history. The plants are wrong because some are extinct or engineered. The diagrams are wrong because we're misreading technical schematics as medieval art. The text is wrong because it isn't meant to be read aloud, only decoded by someone with the proper framework. The problem with these theories is that they are cinematic. They feel good. They protect you from the discomfort of the mundane. But the truth is, you don't need aliens or time travel to be disturbed by this manuscript. Because the most disturbing answer is the simplest. A human being made this. A human being understood it. And we don't. Now we need to talk about the manuscript's ownership story, because the book's journey is part of its aura. It moved through Europe in ways that suggest secrecy, prestige, and value. At points in its history, it was associated with powerful collectors and intellectual circles where alchemy, astrology, medicine, and cryptography were not fringe curiosities. They were serious pursuits. And a book like this would have been treated like a weapon or a miracle, depending on who held it. A palace chamber appears, filled with instruments and curiosities. An astrolabe glints in candlelight. Glass jars sit on shelves like captured storms. A manuscript rests on a table like a sleeping animal. Someone believes it contains forbidden knowledge. Someone else believes it contains a path to power. And someone else just wants to sell it. This is why the manuscript's most believable identity is also the hardest to prove. A private manual, a specialized text, a book made for a small group with shared training, a group that vanished. If you were part of a secretive intellectual tradition, you wouldn't necessarily write in plain Latin. You might use an invented script. You might use shorthand. You might embed meaning in images that act like memory anchors. You might assume your students already know the legend behind each diagram. And if that tradition died without passing the key forward, then the book becomes a sealed rune forever. And that possibility has an emotional weight people don't talk about enough. Because it means the Voynich Manuscript might not be unsolved in the romantic sense. It might be orphaned. It might be the surviving body of a lost conversation. Now let's address the harsh reality of the Voynich Manuscript's modern life. It doesn't just resist translation. It attracts false solutions. It generates confidence in people who think they have cracked it. Because the moment you map symbols to letters, your brain starts hearing words. The moment you decide a plant looks like something, your brain starts building a whole story around it. The manuscript feeds pattern recognition like an addiction. A modern screen shows a forum thread filled with excitement. Someone claims they've decoded a paragraph. A crowd gathers. Screenshots spread. The theory feels irresistible for a few days. Then a specialist points out a fatal flaw. The excitement collapses. The solver disappears. The manuscript remains untouched. This cycle is part of the mystery now. The book doesn't just sit in the past. It actively shapes the present. It turns people into believers. It turns skeptics into obsessives. It turns careful thinkers into gamblers, betting their reputation on a translation that won't survive contact with scrutiny. So let me ask you directly. If you had 1 week alone with the manuscript, no internet, no outside opinions, just you and the pages, what would you focus on first? Would you chase the text? Or would you chase the images? Would you try to decode? Or would you try to understand? Now we return to the promise of all pages, because the pages themselves tell a story even without translation. The manuscript begins with the natural world, plants, roots, forms that suggest medicine. Then it moves to the sky, time, cycles, zodiac anchors. Then it moves to the body, fluid, transformation, processes. Then it expands outward into large cosmological diagrams. Then it returns to practical preparation with jars and plant fragments. Then it ends with dense text like formulas. That arc feels intentional. It feels like a curriculum. From ingredients to timing to application to theory to preparation to instructions. And if that arc is real, then the manuscript isn't random art at all. It's a system. So why can't we read it? Here are the main possibilities, laid out like a case file, not as answers, but as doors. The first door is that it's a cipher hiding a real language. If that's true, the key method is missing, and the encryption may be complex enough to defeat basic approaches. It might not be a simple substitution. It might involve multiple steps, abbreviations, or an encoded phonetic system. In that case, the text is meaningful, but locked. The second door is that it's an invented language, a constructed system with its own grammar and vocabulary, a language designed for a closed group. If that group vanished, the language died with them, leaving one lonely artifact behind. In that case, the text is meaningful, but orphaned. The third door is that it's a hoax engineered to look meaningful, a performance of language, complete with word-like spacing and section-specific vocabulary patterns. A visual and statistical illusion designed to impress. In that case, the meaning is the reaction it creates. The mystery is the product. The fourth door is that it's something we're not defining correctly at all. Not a narrative language, not a cipher, not a hoax, but a mnemonic system, a technical shorthand, a coded set of labels tied to images, a book that doesn't translate cleanly because it wasn't meant to be read like normal text. In that case, the manuscript is meaningful, but we're using the wrong tools. And then there's the final door that lives in the shadows of every other door. The possibility that the manuscript has always been readable, but only in a specific relationship. Teacher to student, master to apprentice, initiate to initiate. A living key that never got written down. Now we come to the final twist, and it's the one that makes the Voynich Manuscript feel like a tragedy instead of a puzzle. The author wrote with certainty. The author drew with confidence. The author built a book designed to last. But the author never included the bridge for strangers. No glossary, no translation, no introduction, no safety rope. That suggests the author didn't care about strangers. The author cared about one audience, and that audience is gone. A final page sits open, dense with script, calm and unbroken. The symbols look like they're still waiting to be spoken aloud by the right mouth. The camera pulls back slowly until the manuscript becomes small again. The room around it becomes larger and emptier. The emptiness feels like the true subject of the story. The missing reader. The missing key. The missing world where this made sense. So here's the question I want to end on, because it is the question that keeps this mystery alive. If the Voynich Manuscript is not solvable by brute force, not solvable by genius alone, and not solvable by endless theories. Then what exactly are we missing? A method, a context, a tradition, a second book, or a person? And I want to know what you think. Is this manuscript a locked message, a dead language, a brilliant con, or a map to a kind of knowledge we no longer know how to recognize? The book closes with a soft, final sound. The cover looks plain again, almost innocent. But now you understand the real horror. Not that we can't read it, but that someone once could. And whoever that was, they took the answer with them into silence.